Hello, I'm David Mello at the Fall River Public Library. I'm the supervisor of children's services here. And today I'd like to share with you one of my passions, and that is the collecting of toy robots. I've been collecting toy robots since 1993. At present, I have 160 of them in my collection. Some people collect bottle caps, some baseball cards, some action figures. People collect all sorts of things, and my particular interest is these wonderful tin toys. And one of the reasons I collect them is, and I guess it holds true for many collectors of old tin toys, is that it helps you reconnect with that part of your childhood that was very special. Some of your happiest memories are from your childhood, and these certainly are a connection for me to that particular time. And my collection primarily is tin toy robots from the 1950s and 60s. Most of them are made in Japan. Those are considered some of the best made and most ingenious of the toy robots, the Japanese-made ones. And I've got some of them here to share with you. And the interest in toy robots primarily is, and in general, space toys for that matter, really comes in the late 1950s, primarily in 1957 with the Russian launch of Sputnik. It was the start of the space race. All eyes were on outer space and the mysteries that were held out there and the race to get man out there into space as well as on the moon. And this sparked the interest of many young boys, some girls I might imagine, but it mostly hit the boy market to get toys that directed their interest toward the exploration of outer space. And the Japanese were right there to fill that market. And the first robots actually were made in the 1940s, but never really caught on. As I said, it was in the 1950s with the advent of the space race that space toys and robots really became very, very popular. One of the other things that helped spur the interest was of a particular movie that was released in 1956 by MGM, a movie called Forbidden Planet, starring Walter Pidgeon, Anne Francis, and Leslie Nielsen. And it also starred, as a matter of fact, he stole the screen, a particular robot called Robbie. And here is Robbie the robot. He is considered one of the holy grails of toy collectors, and he was made in 1956 by one of the premier Japanese toy manufacturers called Nomura. And he was known, and he was sold at the time under the name Mechanized Robot. Now the Japanese, they didn't buy the licensing for the name Robbie. As a matter of fact, they kind of went on in a sneaky way. They saw this potential for this wonderful movie prop, and they quickly put him into manufacturing. And so he's not called Robbie the robot at all. He's just called Mechanized Robot, but we all know who he is. And he is a wonderful toy, and we're going to turn him on for you right now. He's very heavy as well. He has 2 D-cell batteries in each of his legs. We'll turn Robbie on right now so you can see what he does. He's got his little switch right in the front here. And there he goes into action. And as you can see, he walks forward in that very robotic, mechanized manner, but all the wonderful action is taking place right in his head. All the pistons and cams turning, the antennas swirling around, the lights flashing. And it's no wonder he's one of the most prized robots out there for collectors to get their hands on. Now again, he was originally made in 1956. This, however, is not one of those original ones. In 1990 to 1992 approximately, the company Metal House, using all the original wooden molds that they would use to create the tin framework for these robots, they came out with a limited run. And this is actually one of those. And still very hard to find even in the remake. They no longer make them. And so he's one of the most prized robots in my collection. And at the time, Robbie the robot in the movie Forbidden Planet, he just captured everyone's imagination. And it was really from then on, you saw a real surge in the production of toy robots. At the time, too, Robbie the robot was the most expensive movie prop ever made at a price of $50,000 just for the cost of that robot suit. And for years, people thought it was an actual robot that they had on the screen. It was that convincing, but there was actually a person hidden inside the costume. One of the premier manufacturers of toy robots is a company called Horikawa. They probably are responsible for more toy robots out on the market than any other Japanese company. And one of their big sellers in the 1960s was this fellow right here. And he is known as the Attacking Martian. And you can still buy these, you find these in antique stores. You can find them on eBay. Most of them aren't working because the mechanics of them was kind of delicate, and when kids played with them, they played with them kind of rough. I originally had one in 1960, and this is not that particular one. You see, I took mine apart. I wanted to see how he ran. Well, I got to find out how he ran. I got to see all the inner workings, but I was not successful in getting him back together. That was the fate of a lot of my robots when I had them at the time. But this is the Attacking Martian, and he's got kind of a surprise in store for you, so pay close attention to him. Yep. And he marches forward, swinging his arms, and he's got those guns hidden in his chest. And this particular robot was extremely popular for many, many years. There are several different versions of him out there. Some with a human face, more like an astronaut. Some are in silver, some are in gold, but all of them have that, those hidden machine guns. We'll turn off the lights too to show you how cool that is. Now, in Christmas of 1967, this was one of the gifts I received, and it was remains and one of the most special Christmas gifts I ever received. I just fell in love with the robot at that time. My cousin, he received this particular one that same year. I still have fond memories of us battling together, our robots both going at it. And this particular robot is known as the Fighting Martian. And he has a little different action from his brother over here. He has the lighted head and a machine gun that sways back and forth. I still have fond memories of that Christmas morning with both robots battling each other. Now, in the 1950s and 60s, when these robots were made, there were no modern transistors or anything like that. These robots, these toys, are more likened to clocks. If you take them apart, there's a sophisticated system of gears and cams and springs and levers, And all of them, once they're in motion, they create the whole animatronic effect of the robots walking forward and the lights going on. They really are pretty ingenious toys for the time. Now, the Japanese were always well ahead of their time in robotics. And it was after after World War II that the Japanese actually got into the manufacturing of toys. You see, after World War II, it was limited by the treaties of the time what the Japanese could actually manufacture. One of those things was toys, and they took up that challenge, and in the 1950s, 60s, and even 70s, they were some of the leading premier toy manufacturers in the world. And with their manufacturing of the robots, granted they're just toys, but they were like showing the rest of the world through these toys just exactly what their capabilities were in the robotics field. And you can see by what they can do, they turned out very impressive toys, and to this day they're among the leading creators in the robotics industry. And I'll show you another Japanese robot over here. He's a smaller version, kind of similar to the attacking Martian. And he is known as the gear robot. Now, all robots were violent with guns and shooting lasers from their chests. This guy is kind of neat. He just walks calmly along with these spinning gears in his chest. And if you look close enough, you can actually see some of the actual gears that propel the robot. I'm going to close the lights. And he has a glowing head. And the machinery in him is just so smooth. He so smoothly moves along. And this is known as the gear robot. And Horikawa produced many different gear robot versions. And aside from the machine guns and the gears, another robot emerged. This one's kind of neat as well. And he has kind of a surprise. That was one of the challenges for the toy industry, especially in the manufacturing of these robots, was these surprise features that they would add on. It was just not robots that would walk swinging their arms back and forth, but they had these hidden little surprises, and this robot certainly has one of them. And there we go, a hidden TV screen. Shows a landscape of the moon and rockets in outer space. And this particular robot, he goes justifiably by the name the television robot, or television spaceman. And TV being such a cool feature of the 1950s, why not put a TV in a robot? Now, in 1965, another important TV series came along that helped boost space toys, in particular robots, and gave us one of the most endearing of all robots. This particular fellow, known as B9, or the Lost in Space robot. And this particular robot was manufactured in 1966 by the American toy company Remco. And you can still grab these robots. I just recently picked this one up at a toy show in Boston. And for his age, he's in pretty good condition. A lot of these older plastic robots, they were manufactured out of a very fragile, delicate plastic. A lot of the components would break. Sometimes you have to, you might not get a complete robot, but you might have to search around for other robots that are damaged to kind of salvage parts and get them working. He was not working at the time, but I managed to get him going. And here's the Lost in Space robot. Now he can go forward and backward. He has a little device in his back that can control what direction he goes in. But as you can imagine, any kid in the 60s growing up that was a fan of the series, Lost in Space, you would want to grab one of these. You just had to have one of these, especially if you were a fan of robots. And he has the added additional feature of he's got these cool moving arms with the little levers in his back. And in 1966, he appeared in the Sears and Roebuck catalog. I'm sure those of you who are about my age, you couldn't wait to get the Christmas edition of the Sears and Roebuck catalog to see what toys would be featured that year. And he appeared in the Sears and Roebuck catalog first in 1966 at the princely sum of $3.99. This robot, depending on the condition of him and whether he comes in the box or not, can top about $500. Actually, on the prices of toy robots, some of them can be kind of expensive, some of the rarer ones. Last year at Christie's, in an auction specifically for toy robots, there was a robot known as the Lavender Robot from the 1950s, very difficult to find, and he sold for a price of $81,100. So there are some really serious collectors of toy robots out there. I would not pay such a price. Nor would I be able to, even if I wanted to. Okay, back to our Japanese robots. And as I mentioned, robots are full of surprises. This is the Thunder Robot, though he looks kind of, almost kind of silly with the helicopter on his head, helicopter propeller on his head, and those great big eyes of his. You can't trust robots. He looks pretty harmless, but he's got a surprise in store as well. And we'll see what that is. And here's the Thunder Robot. He has guns hidden in the palms of his hands. And he's a cool example, another cool example of the Japanese robot. Now, the name robot first came on the scene in 1942. It was coined, first of all, by the chess playwright Karl Kopek for his play Rossum's Universal Robots. Robot is actually based on a chess word, robato, which means work or labor. And that's what robots primarily were designed to do in the play, to take the place of human beings, to do the work that was considered drudgery and repetitive. Matter of fact, some interpretations of robato means repetitive work. And but the robots kind of take over in that in that play. Robots aren't at that point yet, but some say eventually they will be. So that's why I'm kind to them now. Now, this particular robot right over here is from China, and he's a cool little robot. He's much not as old as some of these others. He was manufactured in the 1980s. And he's called the Monster Robot. But he's really not that monstrous. But he's got a surprise to him as well. Now it looks like more like a kitten hidden inside that robot costume. Some versions have a Godzilla head, which actually pops out and breathes smoke. But this is actually the rarer version that has this kind of tiger or cat-like creature in there. But again, he does really well what a lot of these toy robots are meant to do, and that's to surprise and to thrill. And so that's the toy monster robot from China. Okay, this little fellow right over here is a Russian-made robot. He's very simple and not very exciting when compared with these other robots, but I want an example of a Russian-made robot in my collection. And he kind of walks forward, swinging his arms. You can see the colored discs changing colors in front. But not very dynamic when, again, compared with some of the others. I don't think, in general, toys that I've seen come from Russia from the 1950s and 60s, they really weren't all that well made or not made to do very exciting things. They were very simple. And I do have the box for him, but I don't know his name because I don't read Russian. And that brings us to another point about collecting toy robots, or any toy for that matter. It's always great if you can get the box to go along with them. I didn't bring any samples of boxes with me today, but for some of them I do have the boxes. Now, if you have the box, that can increase the value of the robot almost by another 50%. Of course, that always is determined by the condition of the boxes. And the space toys and the toy robots from the 1950s, some of the boxes were really, really exciting in the designs. They actually sold the toys. The illustrations were very colorful, very dramatic, often showing these robots on another planet or on Earth itself, kind of taking over large cities and blazing their guns. Any little boy going through, I remember going through Bradley's in Fall River, or Arlen's, for those of you who might remember these old stores, and seeing them up on the toy shelves, and they just captured your imagination. So these boxes are very important to collectors, and if you can get these toy boxes with the robots, it dramatically increases the value of them. And this particular fellow, I remember the box that went with him when I first saw him, and this was, I came across him in, if those of you remember, Bradley's in the city. I no longer have the box for him, but this is a Robot Tank Z, or also known as Robot R1. And he is a type of robot that's known as a skirt robot. You'll see that he has no legs. You have two different types of robots, basically. The robots with legs, and those known as robots with skirts. Flat in front, no legs shown, and he's a really cool robot. And he's known as a mystery action robot, simply because you never know what direction he's going to be going in. And of course, he has that added surprise of the laser guns popping out of his chest. My dog at home is particularly fond of this one. I'll turn this one on the living room floor, and he'll run to another room. And he's just a really exciting robot. And this particular robot is a very good example of the high quality metal lithography that they included in these toys. Such a strong attention to detail and color and design. A lot of people collect these robots, believe it or not, these old toys, as being actual pieces of artwork. You don't find craftsmanship like this today in toys, nor do you find lithography work like you find on the surface of these robots. Many of the illustrations are actually raised. They're in high relief. You can feel all the little rivets going up and down. It's a beautiful example, not just of a toy robot, but just of toy manufacturing in itself. And also the way it incorporates not only metal, but plastic and lights, and it's just an ingenious toy. Another beautiful robot that incorporates both plastic and metal is this particular robot from Taiwan known as the Piston Robot. Now, as you got into the 70s, there were a lot more restrictions placed on toys. Tin was considered dangerous, and with good reason. Any child taking these tin robots apart would find very sharp, almost razor-like edges. A lot of tiny, small gears inside of them, and so restrictions started regulating the amount of tin that was used. This is a nice example of a tin and plastic robot. It makes very good use of the clear plastic. Inside you can see wonderful lithographic work on the tin, all those different diodes and dials and gears showing through. It is really a nicely envisioned toy. And he's known as the Piston Robot, and we'll get him running for you. Eventually, in the 1970s, toward the middle of the 1970s, is when you begin to see less and less tin used in toys until they all became basically plastic. A lot of the toys from that era, as well as from the 80s, were not made nearly as well as the tin toy robots. A lot of them, entire runs of these robots, were manufactured that they didn't even work. From the moment you bought them off the shelf, they just did not work, which led to the end of a lot of these toy manufacturers. There were problems using metal rods and vinyl gears that once inside the robots, the gears would shrink on the metal rods, break, and the toys just would not work. And that was right from the get-go, from taking them down off the store shelf and getting them in your home and turning them on. They just did not work. And there's a lot of them out there from the 80s that you can buy and display, but you'll never get them working. And here's our Piston Robot. And this is just a cool robot to see with all the lights off. He has a very nice stride to him. The pistons are going at full steam, and just a very exciting robot to watch. And that's the Piston Robot right there. And I have this particular robot, which is the oldest robot in my collection, and unfortunately he ran for a while, but he no longer runs anymore. The motor used in this robot is just so primitive, it just basically deteriorated. He's from 1957. He's called the Electric Robot, and he was manufactured by the Marx Corporation in the United States. And some of his features still work. His movable arms that you can see over here, it's kind of cool still. He still is able to produce Morse code. I think he's still able to, let me see. He used to still. So you could send Morse code signals with them. That still works. And on the back of his head, you have the Morse code, I guess to send the codes, it has the listing of the how many dots represent the different letters. And his eyes still light up. And this robot was kind of cool because he comes with his own repair kit in his stomach. It has little hammers and little screwdrivers, so if he ever breaks down, he can repair himself. And that is the Marx Electric Robot. And my last robot that I'm going to share with you is the smallest one in my collection, and he's from the 80s. This tiny little wind-up robot. He is just so cool, and we'll get him running for you. Oops. He's feeling a bit tired today, I guess. There he goes. And he's just really cool. And if you're looking to collect tin toy robots or tin space toys or any type of toy robot, there are still wonderful antique stores and secondhand stores you can visit throughout the New England area. And occasionally, if you're lucky enough, you can come across one of these robots. If it's non-working, that's quite common. First thing to do if you ever take them home, or any mechanical tin toy, before you start to take it apart, use fresh batteries, put them inside. Sometimes they won't fire up right away. The motors are just kind of frozen in place. Sometimes it takes nothing more than a tap on the feet or a tap on the back, and it's amazing. They'll fire up right away. If that fails, then you have the arduous task of opening them up. Sometimes it's nothing more than a little wire that might have become unsoldered. Have a decent soldering iron, and chances are you can get these working. They require a little bit of patience. I don't know electronics very well, or I'm not very mechanically inclined, but if you're very patient, looking them over, finding out what wires might go where, you can kind of figure it out on your own. There's also a wonderful site online called Alphadrome, specifically for toy robot collectors. You can get some wonderful advice for getting these old robots going again. They offer diagrams of the insides and lots of helpful tips to restore your robots. And that's been very helpful to me in getting a lot of these old robots running. And thank you for allowing me to share my particular passion for collecting these wonderful old toys. Every time I take them out, they help me reconnect to my childhood and happy memories. And I love just looking on them up on their shelves and admiring the creativity and the ingenuity and the imagination that went into making these old, wonderful tin toys. And thank you very much for allowing me to share.